IO9 presents The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. And here are your hosts, John Joseph Adams and David Barr Kirtley.
Hello, and welcome to episode 45 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy.
Hi, I'm John Joseph Adams. I'm the editor of Lightspeed and Fantasy Magazine, and I've also edited several anthologies, such as Under the Moons of Mars, New Adventures on Barsoom, which comes out in February, and Armored, which comes out in March.
And I'm David Barr Kirtley. I'm the author of many short stories, including The Skull-Faced Boy, about an intelligent zombie who organizes hordes of mindless zombies into an unstoppable army. The story was just reprinted in the young adult anthology Z Zombie Stories, which also features fiction by Kelly Link, Catherine Valenti, Jonathan Mayberry, and others. And our guest today is Jim Butcher. He's the author of the best-selling Dresden Files series, about a modern-day wizard private eye named Harry Dresden. The series was adapted into a TV show, which ran for one season on the Sci-Fi Channel. Jim is also the author of the Codex Alera series, about a lost Roman legion in a fantasy world.
Okay, so let's get to our interview.
All right, so we're here with Jim Butcher. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Okay, so first of all, it's basically impossible to say anything about your most recent Dresden book without totally spoiling the ending of the previous one. Is that something that concerns you at all, and how have you handled that while promoting the new book?
No, not really. It's gotten around so much now that I'm not too worried about spoilers. Plus, as the writer, I'm always kind of focused on the next book. So, what happened a couple of books ago, what Harry getting shot and all was, it's way far in the past for me, maybe even more so than for the reader. So, I'm already busy working on the book, 2 books down the line from that one.
So how did fans react to the ending of Changes, and were there any particularly extreme reactions?
Yeah, they were really upset. Or at least some of them were. Some of them were upset in a good way, and some of them were, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're ending the series. There was everything from I really love the way that ended to you've got to be kidding me, I'll never read anything you do ever again. The whole ending of the book, Dresden getting shot, falling into a lake, seeing a light, and that's the end of the book, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe the series is over. And I'm telling them, over? Are you kidding? My kid just started going to college. I can't end the series yet.
So how did the Dresden Files series come about in the first place?
Oh gosh, it came about as a result of me telling my writing teacher I wanted to prove to her how wrong she was about her various theories on how to write novels, and she'd been giving me very good advice for a couple of years, and I'd been ignoring her because I knew better on account of I had a degree in English literature, whereas she had merely published 40 novels. One semester I finally decided, okay, you know what, I'm going to do everything she says. I'm going to be her good little writing monkey. I'm going to do absolutely everything she wants, fill out all these little forms for her, do the little worksheets, and she'll see what awful crap comes out of that kind of writing process. And I wrote Stormfront, the first book of the Dresden Files.
And so how'd you come up with the character of Bob the Skull?
Bob the Skull was an inside joke between me and my teacher. I had written the first chapter, and she had read it, and it was a conference course. And she had read it, and she says, okay, I think this is good. What happens next? And I'm telling her about how I want to give Dresden this lab assistant kind of character who's going to be there to sort of help him with the really super technical magical stuff. Dresden can explain all the basic magical stuff to the cops because that's the idea. That's how you get information to the reader. Is you have somebody ask questions in the story, and then you have a character answer them, and then you know what's going on. But I wanted to have another character who Dresden would go to ask questions, and I'm telling her about this lab assistant character. She says, all right, that's fine. We can use that as long as you don't make him a talking head, which is a craft term for the character who just shows up and spews information and then goes away. A lot of times you would see characters like that in the old science fiction movies where some guy they'd go to consult the scientist, and you tell he was a scientist because he had a white lab coat on. He would say, well, as you know, Bob, the mating cycle of the average ant. And it's like, well, but if Bob knows, then how come the guy is explaining it to him? So that's why he's a talking head character. So I created a literal talking head named Bob, and that's how I put them together. I remember my teacher reading his first appearance in the book, and she kind of looks up at me and raises one eyebrow and says, "You think you're funny, don't you?"
Okay, so one of your other recent books was a collection of Dresden short stories entitled Side Jobs. What gave you the idea to write those stories?
I needed money. I first got invited to an anthology. I think maybe I just gotten done with Death Masks. I think was about the right time for it, and I still wasn't making a whole lot of money on the books. It was a pretty good part-time job. And we had just moved, and I had just gotten the Alera books going, and I still needed more money and to kind of help us with several expenses and bills. And so I got an invitation. They said, "Hey, do you want to write for money?" And I said, "Yes, I want to write for money." And so I started penning things for these anthologies. Now I'm to a point where I don't need to do that to really upgrade my income any, but I still get invitations, and the short stories they're a good challenge for me because they're very difficult for me to write. So I just kept writing and writing, and then I realized, hey, I've almost got enough for a collection here. And if I add a kind of novella length to it, we can actually do a collection. And plus, I wanted to get all the stories into one book so that the fans of the series wouldn't have to necessarily go out and buy half dozen other anthologies to collect all the short stories.
What were some of those anthologies, and did the themes maybe suggest ideas that you never would have come up with on your own?
Oh yeah, because they have a theme like My Big Fat Supernatural Wedding. It's like, okay, I'll write a wedding themed short story. That seems easy enough. And the next one is My Big Fat Supernatural Honeymoon, and it's like, okay, I got to come up with some kind of honeymoon story, and then it was during that time that I watched some special on History Channel where they talked about the original meaning of honeymoon, which was a Viking thing where you would go out you would take your wife out for 4 weeks and vanish with a lot of mead and party with your wife. And I said, okay, we can do some mead things. And then, one was called Strange Brew. It's like, okay, I got to have somebody mess around with the beer and like that. And Star-Crossed Lovers was another one, except I think they changed the title to Songs of Love and Death. But that was okay because my story still fit anyway.
Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit about the origins of your Codex Alera series?
Codex Alera, I got started on a bet, literally. I was on this. I think it was in It was in 1999. And I was on the Del Rey Writers Workshop list, the Del Rey Online Writers Workshop, which was an email list where folks would write stuff and they would get critiqued by other writers. It was all aspiring writers that were there, and so we had gotten into a discussion on storycraft, and one side of the discussion was kind of holding up the holy idea as being the thing you really need for a story. You need a really great idea. And if you have a really great idea, then really, no matter how bad a writer you are, you're still going to have a really good book come out of it. And they were using Jurassic Park as an example. Even if you don't write well, if it's a great enough idea, re-engineering dinosaurs, then that's going to be awesome. And the other side of the argument, which was the side I was on, was it doesn't matter how tired and old the idea is, if you can do it well, you're going to have a successful book. And then on our side of the argument, I was holding up look at how many different versions of Romeo and Juliet have we seen, that are still good. And so the discussion waged back and forth. It was one of those things where you hit the reply button and then the caps lock key and started typing. Because it was all of us just a bunch of wannabe writers who were just flame warring one another continuously. And finally it came down to there was some guy on the other side of it, who's like, all right, if you think it's so easy, I'd like to see you write a book with tired ideas and see how well they do. And why don't you let me give you a bad idea and we'll see what kind of a good book you can write out of it. And me being young and cocky and aspiring writer on, internet loudmouth like everybody else that was there, said, no, you know what? Why don't you give me 2 terrible ideas and I'll use them both? So the guy says, all right. And he says, okay, first terrible idea. Let's see. You know what? I am tired of Lost Roman Legions. I am so sick of the Lost Roman Legion stories. All the Lost Roman Legions should have been found by now. you go ahead and Lost Roman Legion, that's title 1, or that's bad idea 1. And I'm like, okay. And bad idea number 2, and he says, Pokemon. I'm so tired of Pokemon. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. And so I took Lost Roman Legion and Pokemon, and I went and researched the Lost Roman Legion, which is the Ninth Hibernia Legion, which is what the one everybody is talking about when you talk about Lost Roman Legions, who apparently marched into a thunderstorm and didn't march up the other side. But I said, okay, so we've got this Lost Roman Legion. I figured out about half of them are Roman citizens, about half of them are German mercenaries, and then they've got their camp followers with them. And that's a pretty good colony level. If you're going to send somebody somewhere and tell them, hey, start a society, that's a good way to do it. And then I said, okay, so we've got this legion. Where do they go? Well, obviously, land of the Pokemon, and went and researched where Pokemon came from. And, Pokemon itself is actually a combination of two ideas, one of which is Shinto, the Shinto religion, where spirits of the divine live in all natural things, and that you'd better give them respect. And then they combine that with professional wrestling, and that's where they got Pokemon. But I said, okay, we'll have this land where the spirits of the divine live inside everything, but we can't call them kami because nobody in the Roman Legion's ever been to Japan. So we had to come up with a good name for them, and I'd been watching Big Trouble in Little China in the background while I was working on this idea, and I'm like, I've got to have a name, and just then one of the old Chinese men in the show, who's talking about the supernatural events of the show, says, all tension in the universe, or all movement in the universe is caused by tension between positive and negative furies. And I went, oh, furies, that's perfect. It's even Greco-Roman. I kind of stuck a Roman legion there, gave them a couple thousand years to form a society, added in furies instead of technology for how they got things done, and started writing the story.
So now there's a Dresden Files pen and paper role-playing game. How did that come about?
My high school gaming, or not high school, but college gaming buddy Fred called me and said, hey, I'm kind of doing this role-playing game company that I want to start up, and we'd like to use the Dresden Files for a role-playing game. And I said, Fred, are you kidding? That's a terrible idea. And that was I think that was before Deadbeat even came out, really. And I'm like, Fred, that's an awful idea. Are you sure? And he's like, well, yeah, I really want to. It's like, well, I trust you to treat my stuff well and everything. I just think you've got a terrible idea, and I don't want to see you, ruin yourself on it. And he's like, no, I think I can make something good happen. I'm like, okay, well, if you think so, and we made a deal. And then Fred took that and did what Fred does with things, which is Fred is like Mr. Laser Focus. I mean, he is scary focused on things when he's in drive mode. And so he got the game and took off and started working with it, and then all of a sudden there were all these people that were on his staff that were sending me emails and saying, hey, can you answer this question? Why does this happen in the Dresden Files? And penning down all these things that they would need to create the game world. Very, very detailed stuff. And I probably traded 250 pages of correspondence back and forth over the nature of the Dresden Files world and so on. And then they started putting the game together, and I think Fred says that he had not understood how huge a project it was going to be when he got started, and he wound up having to publish 2 or 3 other games just to grow his company big enough to be able to do the Dresden Files game. And so it was the semi-mythical Dresden Files role-playing game for many years because it still wasn't ready, even though he expected it to be out in 2007, 2008. 2009, and the date kept getting bumped back. But now that it's out, though, I mean, it's one of the most detailed and really one of the prettiest gaming books I've seen so far. I'm very proud of it on Fred's behalf because the game's won all kinds of awards now and is selling really well. And I get to hear from folks all the time about how much fun it is.
I thought it was kind of funny how these guys doing the game had read the book so many times that they had kind of figured out a lot of stuff that was going to happen in the later books.
I know, and they kept throwing things into the role playing game book, and then I'm like, guys, you can't put that in the book. They're like, why not? Because I haven't done it yet. You're going to ruin the surprise. You got to take this out. Oh, okay. Well, can we mention this? No, you can't mention that. But it made me feel really good though that they had been able to to research the story world and then to start putting things together well enough to go, well, okay, if A, then B, then this must be true as well. And it made me really feel good that I'd done a good enough job building the story world that I was like, well, yeah, that is the next logical step, but don't talk about it yet.
I thought it was interesting they mentioned that they had both been involved with the Amber, the role-playing game based on the Amber series by Roger Zelazny. I was just wondering, are you familiar with that game and that series, and did that have any influence on you?
Oh, yeah. I was, I played the Amber Diceless game in Mush form on Amber Mush for years and years while I was in college. And that was where I met Fred, was mushing on Amber with him. And as far as I think writing on Amber was one of those things. It was one of those things because I'd be writing for characters and you play various characters online, and you'd have to get a good idea and write their voice, and then you'd have to kind of build the environment they lived in and so on. And I think it was one of those really good experience building projects because I had to learn. You had to write a lot of dialogue like all the time, it was a good place to learn how to write dialogue. And you had to be able to set mood. You had to be able to describe things very succinctly because if you described them too much, nobody would read it. So you wanted to describe things in the least amount of space you possibly could, kind of in this totally text-based virtual world. And I got to the point where I would run like 11 different characters at a time, in different windows, and still have to be doing all these characters and keeping up with all these different scenes. And looking back, it's like I can't really think of a better way to start training for writing, the kind of genre fiction that I wanted to write. Although I never would have thought that at the time.
So I understand that you belong to a regular role-playing gaming group. What games have you guys been playing lately?
Well, this whole Gen Con, between my book coming out and going on tour for that, and then Gen Con right afterwards, we haven't met since I think early July. But right now we're playing. Let's see, we just got done playing a Gamma World campaign, and now we're doing. I'm GMing a kind of a steampunk setting game using the Warhammer rules, the Warhammer roleplay rules. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is a one true game as far as I'm concerned. But let's see, we've done a bunch of D&D 4th edition lately. We actually got to play test D&D 4th edition before it came out, which was kind of neat. Although you have to sign all these non-disclosure agreements, it's like, no, I will not talk about D&D 4th edition to anybody. But we had we depending on over the years, we played a bunch of different games. We played Cthulhu campaigns and earlier edition D&D campaigns and so on. We've played Paranoia and Chill and all these other gaming systems. The Marvel superheroes role-playing game from long, long ago.
So I heard you tell a story once about how you discovered that your dad had been this total badass. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, my dad was just my dad. That's what everybody I think thinks about their father. It's like, well, he's dad, and that's what he is. He's kind of the guy that you go to when you've got a problem, and the guy that you're going to deal with if you get in trouble. So as far as I was concerned, my father was just kind of this steady, regular guy that you could always depend on. And we'd go to baseball games sometimes. When I get in trouble, you'd get in trouble with him, and that's kind of who he was. And it never really occurred to me to think that he might have been something else, other than just being my dad. When you're a young kid, you don't really worry about that sort of thing. Anyway, one day I'm up in the attic and I'm rooting around and I come across this old trunk and I open it and I look at the stuff that's in there and I take it downstairs and I say, "Hey, Dad, what's all this stuff?" And he's like, "Well, what do you mean?" And I pull out this old jacket. "Well, what's this? Were you in the Army? Is this an Army jacket?" He's like, "Oh yeah, it's my old jacket." "What's this winged dagger patch on the side?" "Oh, that just means that I would jump out of airplanes." And I'm like, "Well, really?" He's like, "Yeah." And and it turns out, that he's like, "Here, let me show you." And he starts showing me pictures of himself in the Army and look, here's all the weapons I was qualified on. And I was a qualified expert on all these weapons. And I'm like, "Well, you like a sharpshooter?" He's like, "No, son, sharpshooter's the rank below expert." I'm like, "Oh," and he opens them up and he's like, "Yeah, these are all the American weapons, and these are the German weapons, and these are the Russian weapons, and the British weapons that I knew." And he was stationed in Germany during the very beginning of the Cold War. He was Ranger Recon. And most of this is stuff the stuff that he told me at the time, I remember, reading all the stuff, and he's like, oh yeah, and I'm like, what's this one here? And he's like, oh, that's my pen for being the unit's unarmed combat instructor. And I'm like, wow, really? He's like, yeah, and that one's for being the knife fighting instructor. I'm like, wow. And all along, my dad was Rambo, and I never knew it. And he sort of stops and looks over all the stuff, and he looks at me and he says, "So, son, what do you think about that?" And I looked back at him and said, "I think I'll be home by 10." He's like, "Okay, well, in that case, that's good." But but I've been able to, I've continued to kind of research things. He died when I was 20, and as I've kind of looked back over his life and been researching things, I've been putting all these different things together. It's like, well, he trained under a guy. I remember him talking about his drill sergeant, and he trained under a British drill sergeant, and then I went and found out, well, he was stationed in Germany in 1949 and 1951, the dawn of the Cold War. And then I found out he spoke German without an accent, and I found that out when I got in trouble with a friend of mine whose mom was from Germany because his dad had been in the Army. And my dad wasn't home, so she took it upon herself to chew me out on his behalf. And so when my dad showed up at the house, she had worked herself up into a fury and had switched from English to German. I had no idea what she was saying, but I was appropriately terrified. And Dad came in and sort of listened, nodded, and then he just said something in German, and I have no idea what he said, but she burst out laughing and looked at him, and they had like a 2 or 3 minute conversation in German. And then Dad took me home, and I'm like, "Do you speak German?" He's like, "Yeah." And she says, "He doesn't even have an accent. That's amazing." And so I find out all these little things that add up over time, and I find out, well, the only soldiers at that time in the Army that were training were Ranger units who were being trained for intelligence gathering, because this was after the ONI in World War II. It was after Truman had closed down the ONI and before the CIA opened up. There was like this 7 or 8 year gap in intelligence gathering, and so it fell to the Army to do it, and the Army had assigned Ranger units to do it. And my dad was this highly trained Ranger, and yet during the entire Korean War, he stationed in Germany, apparently working in a warehouse. It's like, no, guys like that don't get assigned to warehouse inventory duty in Germany, and I found out all these things where I think that he was actually one of these guys, and their identities were classified until like 2006. And so you find this stuff out that you never really knew was true, because it was just my dad, and he worked at the steel company, and he was actually worked at their warehouse doing their inventory. And you find out all these things later. It's like, oh my gosh, these people have these whole lives that you don't know about.
Did his character or any of that material like that, have you been able to use any of that for your fiction?
I try not to put people that I actually know. I try not to have those people get stuck in there. The influence of somebody like my dad is tremendous. Because my dad is the guy who taught me that the really tough guys have got no need to talk about how tough they are. They've got no need to prove how tough they are to anybody. They're just ready to be that way when they have to be that way. I actually saw my dad as a 59-year-old man. He's about 5'7", square off against a 6'3" weightlifting biker who was refusing to leave the yogurt store because he was sweet on one of the girls who worked there. My parents owned several TCBY yogurt chains in the late 80s, and I worked at them inevitably. And this guy had stayed too late, and I did not know what to do. And this kind of tells you about what kind of person my father was, that I didn't call the police when the guy wouldn't leave the store after it was time for us to close. I called my dad, and I'm like, what do? Do I call the police? He's like, no, I'll come up and take care of it. Don't worry. Dad comes up, and he comes rolling in, and he's like this stocky 5'7" guy with these big old Popeye forearms. And he walks right in and walks right past the biker and comes up to me and says, "Is that him?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Okay." Takes off his coat, hangs it up on the hook, walks out to the biker and just stops and looks at him. And he's got his back's to me, so I never see the look on his face. But the biker turns and kind of squares off against him, and his chest puffs up a bit. And You just stand like that for a minute, and the biker gets pale and takes a step back, and my dad says, "Sir, it's time for you to leave the store now." And the biker says, "Yes, sir." And turns around and goes, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, my dad's a Jedi. Did you see that?" What happened? I didn't even know. And Dad just kind of turned around and walked back over to me and says, "Okay, let me know if there's any other trouble," and gets his coat on and goes. And like, wow. How did he do that? That was incredible. But apparently I've talked to some folks who are operators now, and apparently they're like, yeah, really, there's ways to let people know that you can do things to them if they really want to start up. And he's like, sounds to me like your dad was just familiar with that. I'm like, okay.
So what's the current status of the film and TV rights to the Dresden Files? Are there any other plans for another TV show or movie?
I have the rights right now. There are folks who are calling. I mean, it's fairly regular that folks who are interested call and ask about it and want to talk to you about what they want to do. But the fact is that very seldom does anything actually get done. Kind of the rule of thumb is it isn't a done deal until their check has cleared the bank. After that, then you can say, okay, now you've got to deal with somebody in Hollywood. But we'll see if anything else comes out. I'm open to the idea. I'm willing to forgive Hollywood for only doing one season. But we'll see what happens.
All right, great. And just, are there any other new or upcoming projects that you'd like to mention?
Right now, I'm working on a fantasy book that is sort of very heavily influenced by the Black Company. There's a steampunk series that I've got in mind that I might want to start working on. That's stuff that I'm doing for the rest of this year. I'm going to do another book this year. Either the steampunk or the fantasy. I'm kind of juggling trying to weigh which one is better. And then of course the next Dresden book, I'll start that at the first of the year, and that was going to be called Cold Days. And we'll see what comes out of that. That should be a lot of fun.
All right, great. Well, Jim Butcher, thanks so much for joining us on Geek's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
And that was our interview. So thanks so much to Jim Butcher for joining us on the show. Okay, and so for our discussion today, we're going to be talking about some recent news stories that are kind of geek interest. And so the first thing I wanted to talk about, this was a few months ago, but there was this conflict between the fantasy author Neil Gaiman and this guy Matt Dean, who is the majority leader of the House of Representatives for the state of Minnesota. And so let's see. So basically what happened was that Neil Gaiman was invited to speak. Okay, well, Neil Gaiman is a very busy guy. And so he has a high speaking fee so that he can, get writing done. And this local library invited him to come in, and he explained that he has this high speaking fee, and they said that that's cool because they had been given money by the state that was in a special fund earmarked for bringing high-profile authors to sort of suburban districts where big authors don't normally come. And the deadline for spending this money was fast approaching, and if they didn't spend it, they were going to lose it. So once they explained that to him, Neil Gaiman accepted, and he donated the money to charity. And I think, as he often does with these speaking fees. And so this guy Matt Dean heard about this. It's not clear how much he really bothered to investigate the circumstances before opening his big mouth in a newspaper interview. And he said that Neil Gaiman, he called him a thief, of, quote, pencil-necked little weasel who I hate, and said that he had, quote, stolen the money from the state of Minnesota. So Neil Gaiman heard about this, and he just sort of, mentioned it sort of funnily on his Twitter thing. And of course, Neil Gaiman has well over 1 million Twitter followers, and so this crashed the Matt Dean's government website. And so Neil Gaiman sort of responded to this. He said, quote, "It's strange watching a grown-up high school bully in power, but the bully vocabulary remains the same." And after this sort of became a big thing on the internet, Matt Dean apologized. He said, quote, "My mom is staying with us right now because my wife's out of town. She was very angry this morning and always taught me not to be a name caller, and I shouldn't have done it, and I apologize."
Worst apology ever.
Yeah, so, wait, I'm looking, how old is this guy?
Yeah, what's up with his mom going to stay with him because his wife's out of town? What, he can't be trusted to stay with by himself? Like, if his wife's out of town? Like, will he just, like, will he not feed himself? He'll just waste away to nothing because he doesn't know how to take care of himself?
Yeah, so it looks like he's about 45, so, and he's, needs to have his mom tell him to, when he should apologize for, being a jerk. But it was sort of making me think of, after the Columbine school shootings, there was this initial rush to blame all sorts of entertainment, in particular Marilyn Manson. Although I think it turned out in the end that the shooters were not actually fans of Marilyn Manson. Not that I think it makes much difference either way. But what really struck me about that was that there was a newspaper article I read at the time where it talked about the congressman sort of picking on Marilyn Manson as just sort of like high school bullies, of the past who are now in Congress, picking on a sort of outcast kid of the past who's now a musician. And I really thought that was an apt observation. And I really wonder, how many people in Congress are former bullies. There certainly don't seem to be a whole lot of people in Congress who are former nerds, There was just this really sad article I read, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, and it was about how lonely congressmen feel who have scientific backgrounds because there are so few people in Congress, who have scientific backgrounds, and that they're constantly just having to rush around trying to correct just basic factual misunderstandings of their colleagues. So it's just kind of, I think, this Matt Dean acting like a bully to Neil Gaiman, I think, is just sort of symptomatic of this larger issue of a lack of geeks in positions of power, political power, I guess I should say. Politicians sort of picking on artists does have very serious consequences sometimes for the arts and for society generally. I mean, there's this book that came out recently called, I think, The 10-Cent Plague, about the sort of witch hunts against comic books, kind of I think it was in the 50s and 60s. And this resulted in the institution of something called the Comic Code, which put all sorts of very strict limitations on what characters in comic books could do, and essentially just sort of crippled artistic seriousness in comic books for decades afterward. Actually, Stephen King, I think, in his book Dance Macabre, talks about this, about how he grew up reading these wonderful EC horror comics, which all sorts of grisly things happened, and I think they were the most popular comics of the day. And then they all just sort of went away. They were all sort of killed by this political campaign. But so, I mean, when this whole Matt Dean, Neil Gaiman thing went down, somebody pointed out that Matt Dean, the number of people who had voted in the election, who had voted for Matt Dean to put him into office, it was something, I don't know, it was like 30,000 voters, something like that. And just pointing out, that Neil Gaiman has well over 1 million Twitter followers. And, I don't know how many of them live in Minnesota, but it's not at all inconceivable that, if every Neil Gaiman Twitter follower who lives in Minnesota voted against Matt Dean, that could swing the election. And so in response to Matt Dean's comment about, just like hating Neil Gaiman, Neil Gaiman said, like, I really wouldn't mind if Minnesotans would consider voting for someone who doesn't keep a hate, keep a hate list of people. I mean, it's all well and good for individual authors, especially, if they have a following like Neil Gaiman does, to, they can sort of have some arsenal to defend themselves against sort of jerks like this. But I just wonder if, geeks could kind of get together somehow, and that any time a politician is, being a jerk like this to an author, or, agitating to cut funding for libraries and public radio, stuff like that, people, stuff that geeks care about generally, that there could just be some network where, you could get all the big bloggers to really sort of organize people to get out and sort of get more level-headed, rational, kind people into public office.
Yeah, that actually makes me think of there's a story by Jeremiah Tolbert called "The Kansas Jayhawk versus the Midwestern Monster Squad." You can actually read it online. Maybe we can put a link in the show notes. But in that story, there's he postulates an otaku party, which takes over, which becomes a valid party in government, and it's like a geek nerd party.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's more, I think that's more plausible than you might think. I mean, we just interviewed Richard Dawkins. That'll be our next interview that goes up after this episode. But he's always making the point that that atheists are kind of like crapped on by politicians all the time. But there's actually a fairly large number of atheists in the country, but they're not politically organized, and so politicians feel free to just stomp on them. And that if atheists would organize politically and sort of vote in blocks and stuff, that the politicians wouldn't dare to treat them that way. And I think the same is true of geeks. I mean, there's a lot of geeks out there. And
have we talked about Geektopia on the show before?
I don't think we have.
Yeah, so Geektopia is just my sort of idea for like this ideal community for geeks. It sort of grew out of just my desire to just get like a three-story brownstone in New York and like have like me live on one floor, like have one of my other friends live on another floor, or maybe have roommates in each one, but just like fill the building with my friends, and just thinking of it as Geektopia. And then the idea sort of grew to be like, oh, well, what if we all moved somewhere like Kansas or something where land was cheap, and we got we brought even more people together and just built like a little community. And so there's that idea, and then I also had there was a sort of a side idea of Geektopia, which would be like like sort of a geek hangout. Because if you're ever in New York, there's lots of geeky things to do in New York, but basically after 10 o'clock at night, there's nothing to do. It's like, you can go hang out in a bar with all the sort of frat boys and whatnot, and sports fans, but there's nothing actually for geeks. And so the other version of Geektopia was sort of a store / geek hangout place, but the original idea was a community, and like if you have a large enough community, you can say, oh well, we'll hire, we'll pay to have Neil Gaiman come speak at Geektopia, or whatever, and Geektopia could become like an opinion maker. It's kind of like I kind of like envision it's like IO9, but like in the real world, like a city of IO9, basically.
Hey, and speaking of hanging out with geeks in New York, I just created a Facebook page called Geeks Guide to the Galaxy NYC, which I hope is a site that people can. I'll be posting, about stuff going on in New York. And so if you live in New York, or if you visit, and you want to meet other people in the area, follow, like that page on Facebook and come out to some of the events and meet me and meet other people. But my vision of a geek, of a sort of utopian society for geeks has always been, in high school I was assigned to read this book Shogun, by James Clavell, and there's a part right, there's an English sailor who who ends up in feudal Japan, and right at the beginning there's a samurai guy and some servant offends him somehow, he doesn't bow obsequiously enough or something, and the samurai just whips out his sword and chops the guy's head off. And I've always just thought, like if you're a geek, you go around constantly and you just constantly meet people, and they're like, oh, I don't read science fiction, or that's escapist, whatever. And so in my ideal society, geeks would all just carry swords. And whenever anybody said something like that, we could just chop their heads off. And it was just, and that, it just, and like in Shogun, it was just considered like normal. Like nobody would even bat an eye, because it's like, yeah, that's just, how society should work. So, call me a dreamer, call me a utopianist, but that would be my ideal society right there.
I'm right with you there, except that instead of swords, I'd rather we had lightsabers. If that's possible. If we're just dreaming, why not? Yeah. So actually, now that you finally mentioned decapitation, I thought it was kind of funny. Like we have like a little list of show notes of what we're going to be talking about, and so the first line Dave has here is Neil Gaiman versus Matt Dean - Marilyn Manson - Twitter - decapitation, and I was like, okay, how are we going to get from Matt Dean and Neil Gaiman to decapitation via Marilyn Manson and Twitter? I mean, it was kind of a puzzling line, but hey, you made it all work in the end, so good job. It's like, hey, here, take these 4 elements and write a short story out of it, and then you end up with something crazy and awesome. It's like, oh wow, that was great, good job.
Yeah, actually, all our conversations on this show operate along the same principle as Mad Libs. I just take random words and try to string them together in some coherent way.
Yeah, actually, if anybody wants to write a short story featuring Neil Gaiman and Matt Dean and decapitation, Marilyn Manson, and Twitter somehow, I mean, go for it. I'd love to see what happens. All
right, but I guess that should bring us to our next topic, which is this was painful, but so
yeah. Speaking of people who deserve to be decapitated.
Yeah, so there was this blog post on Gizmodo by this intern, and she had gone on a blind date through OkCupid, a dating website, and the guy that she went out with turned out to be a former world champion of Magic the Gathering, and so this writer was just so, I mean, she was just so offended that somebody this dorky would dare go out on a blind date without warning people in advance what a dork he was, or something like that. And so she wrote this really, really nasty blog post in which she mentioned him by name and linked to his Wikipedia page and all this stuff. And so this blew up into a huge internet thing. And my impression was, 95%, if not more, of the comments were critical of her for having posted this nasty thing. I thought really it broke out into sort of 3 separate issues. There was sort of the issue of, are you justified in not going on another date with someone for very shallow, superficial reasons? There's the issue of, is Magic any more deserving of scorn than any other hobby or, whatever? And do you have a reasonable expectation of privacy when you go out on a blind date with someone, that they won't mock you on a popular blog? I guess just to take those point by point, I mean, yeah, I think you're justified in not wanting to go out on another date with somebody for any reason that you have, even the stupid sort of superficial ones. But if you talk about it publicly, you can sort of expect people to point out that you're stupid and that you're being stupid and superficial. Mm-hmm. And then point 2 is, is Magic the Gathering any more inherently dorky than playing poker or playing kickball or badminton or something? And so a lot of people were sort of chiming in to sort of defend Magic the Gathering as a sort of, intellectually rigorous, imaginative, pastime. And it is kind of weird to think about, like, sort of what makes one card game like Magic dorky and what makes another card game like poker cool. That's why I have James Bond in my notes here. I was thinking, like, you can't, because I really liked that recent James Bond movie, Casino Royale, with Daniel Craig. And I was thinking, like, how whacked out would it be if, you're watching the trailer for that and Judi Dench is like, Bond, you're the best Magic the Gathering player in the service. We need you for this mission.
Yeah.
I think that would actually be pretty cool. But I mean, it would totally, you're like, wait, James, you have no trouble accepting that James Bond plays poker, but you're like, wait, he plays Magic the Gathering? And so, I mean, what is it about Magic the Gathering that gives it that sort of dork, feel? Is it just that it has fantasy images on the cards, or, I mean...
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just that same general taint that all sort of genre fiction has. This girl probably would have reacted the same if she went on a date with me or you, like when she found out that, you wrote and published science fiction stories, or that I, was a science fiction editor. If anything, you'd think she would have been impressed that he was so good at, he'd make a living at playing a game. That doesn't earn any respect. I mean, this was on Gizmodo for God's sake. It's like, how can Gizmodo post something that's critical of someone who's awesome at playing games? Isn't that a little hypocritical? I mean, obviously Gizmodo is about gadgets more than just games, but I mean, it's not quite as weird as if Kotaku had played it, had run the story, but...
It's not clear to me that she knew exactly how lucrative his hobby was. I mean, apparently he's made over $300,000 playing Magic the Gathering. And he's also plays poker professionally and is a hedge fund manager. So, I mean, even by the most superficial materialistic criteria, he would be considered a success.
Right. I have to say, I have to kind of give the guy some props for going out on OkCupid and not flying his geek flag. Like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe other than Magic, he's not particularly geeky or something. And he thought like, oh well, I don't want to date a geek. I just want to date like a non geek or something. I don't know. But I mean, like personally, like whenever before I met Chrissy and I was trying to find dates through dating services or like online and stuff. I mean, I used OkCupid at one point, and I mean, I always I was proudly listing all as many geek accomplishments as I could. I mean, like I didn't want to post enough so that people could figure out who I was or anything. But I mean, it's like I wanted to seem as geeky as possible because I mean, all I was interested in meeting was another geek. So. Good for him for actually going out there and trying to hide that. But I mean, I think it didn't work out in the end for him. I mean, although actually, I think he probably made out okay in the end. I mean, he had to suffer some embarrassment there when this happened. But I imagine he probably got plenty of inquiries from women who thought he was awesome. And after this, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, when the story broke, I mean, he it got picked up by like. Felicia Day on Twitter and Veronica Belmont and all sorts of, sort of geek women sort of sticking up for this guy. And, and I guess he was, in fact, deluged with, date offers. So yeah, I mean, actually somebody, what was that on our Facebook thing or something said, well, maybe he and this Gawker, and this Gizmodo writer were in cahoots and they, staged the whole thing as a publicity stunt or something, which I find fairly unlikely. Because I mean, I sure wouldn't want to. I mean, that's playing with fire right there. You don't know how it's gonna go if you were to set something like that up. But yeah, it does seem to have worked out fairly well. I was gonna say actually, I thought he handled it really with a lot of class too. I mean. But yeah, I mean, because John got me to sign up for this stupid OkCupid site too. So I mean, yeah, this is one of those like there, but for the grace of God go I sorts of things when you see this story. But I mean, do you think that you have like an expectation, like a reasonable expectation when you go on a date with someone that they're not going to post about it on their blog? I mean, does that?
Yeah, I mean, crazy? I think that just seems like general sort of acceptable human behavior to assume that I mean, at the worst, you would think that like, oh well, if you go out on a date and you act like a complete asshole or something, like maybe they would blog about it, but not out who you are. I mean, that's like taking it like a step. So far, although I mean, in her case, I guess since the thing that she was appalled by was the fact that he was a Magic champion. I mean, people would have been able to figure it out if she didn't actually spell out who it was. But
I mean, like we just mentioned, it was brought up the possibility, was this staged, for the benefit of the of the individuals. But there was also a lot of speculation. Did the website post this, knowing how inflammatory it was going to be? Just to drive traffic to the website, which is called nerd baiting, I guess, or has become known as nerd baiting because I guess nerds are, are sort of more active on the internet, and so stuff that pisses off nerds gets linked around a lot and drives a lot of traffic. So I guess there's speculation that websites are intentionally posting stuff to upset nerds to drive traffic. So I wonder, to what extent is that happening, and as a nerd, what sort of response should we take? I mean, well, because like when the story broke, I linked to it on Twitter and said, well, check this horrible person out, and John was like, no, don't link to it. That's what they want, and so actually I thought about that a lot, and I'm just not sure what response to take because on the one hand, yeah, if traffic is what they want and you're sort of being manipulated, then that's bad. But on the other hand, like, I'm glad that other people linked to this story, so that as someone who has one of these stupid OkCupid profiles, I'm aware that something like this might happen, because I it was, what's the worst that can happen going out on a blind date with someone? You get ripped on Gizmodo the next morning.
Right.
I'm sad that I have to know that that's a possibility, but I'm glad that I'm forewarned.
Yeah.
It seems futile to me to just sort of try to ignore the thing, ignore offensive things and hope they'll go away. I mean, it seems like for better or worse, you have to engage with them. Maybe decapitate some people. I don't know. Did you ever actually? I was just curious. Did you ever play Magic: The Gathering? I mean, I
never actually did. I did play. There was a Star Trek collectible card game, sort of around the time when Magic was very popular, and I got really into that. And I also played this. There was also a Star Wars one around the same time, and I played that. The thing is, those things are really expensive if you want to build like good decks. At the time I was like working in retail. I think it was either before I was in college or I was in college at the time. Because I actually dropped out of high school when I was 16 and got my GED, and then I didn't start college until I was like 21. There's a period of time there where I was just working and not yet in college. But anyway, some period around that time is when I was playing these, and I spent as much as I could on those two decks or on those two games, and I didn't really have any additional funds to investigate Magic as well. And sadly, all that money and time I devoted to those games, I don't even know what happened to those decks. I probably threw them away or something. It's kind of ridiculous, but
or your mom threw them away.
No, I never had that situation where like my mom would have thrown anything away, because I would have moved out of with my own stuff. I never like moved away and like had stuff left in my mom's house, I just moved out directly with my stuff. So she couldn't have, but
because my mom threw out all my old Dragon magazines. That was, I'm still steamed about that one.
Huh.
But
so did you play Magic though?
I sort of dabbled with it when it first came out, but and I really liked. I mean, I thought it was cool. I really liked the artwork and stuff. But there were like two, essentially a collectible card game. Just basically doesn't appeal to me, because the idea that you had like whoever that you could sort of, it was sort of this arms race where you would have to like keep spending money to be in the game, and if someone spent 10 times as much money as you were willing to, it would give them a big advantage. That didn't appeal to me at all, and just the basic idea that if I lost a match, I would lose one of my cards. I'm just very possessive about my stuff, and I couldn't even bear. I never even played. Whenever I actually played anyone, I was like, I'm keeping all my cards. Just to let you know. Well, I mean, I'm willing to play this game, but I'm not giving you any of my cards.
Right.
So, I mean, I was never really cut out. I'm afraid for Magic anyway. But
I guess that's still around too. They just released some new. Expansion or something. Brandon Sanderson was talking about it on Twitter, and he was sort of saying, "Hey, does anybody want to come play this with me?" Like, I guess he still has a deck and everything, and so he was like, "Hey, I want to come to this pre-release of the new expansion and play against me." Anybody in where he lives, which I think is in Salt Lake City, or certainly he lives in Utah somewhere. But speaking of collectible card games, though, my most lasting memory of them, aside from those Star Trek and Star Wars games that I actually played, was when I was in college. I worked at a Books A Million bookstore for a while, and this was around the time when the Pokemon collectible card game was big. And oh my God, they made so first of all, there was tons of just little children who would come in and buy Pokemon cards, and they were kind of annoying because they were they were wild children who were collecting games, and they get a little crazy about that kind of thing. But then because they were so popular, the manager decided to institute a Pokemon tournament every Saturday. And oh my God, it was just like every child within 10 miles would converge on the store, and it would just be such a nightmare. And so kind of left a bad taste in my mouth after that. Never really dabbled in any collectible card games since then. But I mean, I think that's also sort of partially just because I've been there, done that.
Well, I mean, one thing I observed on the message board discussing this Gizmodo article was that, the writer had referred to Magic as like a game that was popular back in the 90s or something. Mm-hmm. And all sorts of Magic fans chimed in to take exception to that because they're like, it's only grown in popularity since then. It's gotten more and more, it gets more and more popular every year. So I just want to point that out that mm-hmm. according to many, many people, Magic is more popular than it's ever been. And obviously the fact that this guy has made $300,000 playing it, mm-hmm. shows that there must be a lot of people playing it, a lot of interest in it. But speaking of sort of geek discrimination, which we started off talking about, that's sort of the other thing that happened with Magic. This was after I went off to college and stuff. But there were some kids at one of the local high schools where I grew up playing Magic in the lunchroom, and the school like cracked down on it. Because parents complained, because in Magic there's like the different colors of Magic, and there's like the black Magic cards, and one of them was called like Unholy Magic or something like that, and it had a inverted pentagram on it, and so there were the kind of sort of hysterical allegations of that it's sort of like with Dungeons and Dragons, that it's mm-hmm. promoting the occult and stuff like that. So yeah, that was just sort of another angle to the whole, like, man, how stupid, mm-hmm. how stupid can people be?
Yeah.
Off with their heads, I say. All right, so we actually had 17 topics, ready to discuss, and we've made it through 2 of them so far. So I think we might have to save some of these other ones for another day. Thanks everyone for listening. As I said, if you live in the New York area, check out my Geek's Guide to the Galaxy NYC Facebook page.
And if you live in the Lompoc area, check out the Geek's Guide to the Galaxy Lompoc page, except that, I'm the only person that would ever go to anything here. So actually that doesn't exist, so don't look for it. But so yeah, as always, we're sponsored by Audible.com. If you go to our website at geeksguideshow.com, there's a link. Just click on any of the ads there, and you'll go to a page where you can sign up for a free trial subscription and get 1 free audiobook. And it looks like just about everything that Jim Butcher has ever written is available there on Audible.com. So check out one of his books. Yeah, actually, I listened to Stormfront by Jim Butcher, and it was read by James Marsters, who television fans might recognize as Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And that actually is very well done. Although you might be surprised to learn that James Marsters is American, not British, because he has a British accent on the show. But anyway, one of the other ways you can support us is if you go to iTunes and you look for the Geek's Guide to the Galaxy podcast. If you leave a review or rating, that can help us out. How many reviews are we up to, Dave? 71. 71. So you could be number 72 or beyond. We wanted to get 75 by the end of the year. Is that right? Is that what our goal? I thought it was 100 by the end of the year. Oh, okay. Well, we wanted to get 100 by the end of the year. So we have a bit more to go. And if you can help us reach that goal, that would be great. But yeah, if you just you can leave a rating. You don't have to write a review. If you just leave a rating, that's fine too. But reviews are welcome. And then, of course, the other way you can support us is by going to IO9 and leaving a comment on this episode or one of our other episodes. All right, so thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time when we'll be interviewing Richard Dawkins.
The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is a production of IO9. For this episode's show notes, to subscribe to this podcast, or for more information about the show, visit geeksguideshow.com. To learn more about your hosts, visit johnjosephadams.com or davidbarrkirtley.com. Music and voiceover produced by Slipgate 9 Entertainment. If you enjoyed this program, tell your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, tell no one. Thank you for listening.